3.2 External Projects, Project 5, the raised line of the paper. I wanted to put together this short video. I'm going to call it a case study of my sketchbook. I think it's important to demonstrate the sketchbook because I don't think that they should be forgotten, and I think that they don't always get explained or talked about, but I particularly find mine, or I have been at the moment, a core of my project work and assignment work. So this is really just a process and a development of the work for Project 5 and the raised line of the paper. So as we can see here, I've keep my tutorial feedback and pick up on the feedback that my tutor gave me and start bullet pointing some notes and so forth. So to start this project off, I pulled out and started to look at some yarns and some relevant pieces of material, mixed media, that would direct me into this project. Obviously, I'm new to knitting, so I need to start looking at various aspects of yarn and so forth. You know, their texture, 4-ply, 2-ply, and I've also been looking at wool threads, cotton threads, acrylic threads, linen, and also bits of garden twine have been useful. At this stage, I didn't really kind of have any idea of a colour palette, so I've kind of gone a little bit monochrome, kept sort of black and neutral tones, and this was useful with some of the threads that I was using. I didn't really want to kind of start introducing a colour palette as such, but it was more important to get to grips with some machine knitting, the technical aspect as we discussed in my tutorial, and start bringing in the technique, and bringing more knitting and less mixed media, because I did explain to my tutor that I didn't want to feel as though I was kind of just using mixed media as an embellishment to the knitted plain piece, or the sock knitting. But I still think it's important to bring in a little bit of element of it. But I will say that part of my process has been, or I'm learning to make drawings of little samples and little pieces of mixed media like this here. And these have translated into some knitted pieces. We're kind of wanting to move away from the fine art aspect with some of the samples, but they are still becoming useful. So the beginning of the sketchbook is just putting together some ideas of the mixed media that I do like, and starting to play with the knitting machine. So I've extracted some earlier pieces, as we can see here, and then just started to make some of the lines and the movement, translated this into some drawing. And then what I did, just some simple basic machine knitting. I've been having to learn to set the knitting machine up, and it was interesting to start to experiment with various yarns and textures, things like cotton string and garden twine, and some decorative yarns have been interesting to look at. So I started to collate and play with these ideas, and then as I've started to build the sketchbook up, I went into some drawing, some collage work, and it's been interesting because I think some of this collage drawing could quite easily translate into knitted samples. I started to play and make some of the knitted samples, but I didn't make a sample of every drawing. It all has been part of the learning process. Playing with some collage of some mixed media that I'm going to consider using within the knitting. And then I have considered that the monochrome, the neutrals with the black, because I feel that the black makes some of the threads stand out. So I've put together some colour palettes, as we can see here, and then knitted some of them up. And then, quite interesting, I pulled out some old work from ideas and processes where I'd done some stitching, which just replicated the raised line of the paper and related to the research from the Dyslexia Online store. So through here I've placed in some photographic work. I like my sketchbook to be quite visual, and these are some early samples of the raised line where I'd use pipe cleaners and so forth. But it was interesting because the process, even though my process isn't at this stage very complicated, I could in actual fact write down how my knitted pieces began to develop, counting the stitches, counting the block colour with certain rows, then hooking in the pipe cleaner after knitting 10 rows, hooking in 2, hooking in 3, and so forth. And then the idea of that this piece would be manipulated using my mannequin as a platform at this stage. It's interesting with this textile piece or piece of knitted fabric that it has that, still has that playful and structured roll to it, but also feels fidget like, and you can sit there and explore the knitted piece due to the pipe cleaners being wired within the structure. More mixed media, cotton buds and paper straws, and again I discovered through these pieces playing with the mannequin, the straight lines have become curves, exposing the body, playing with tension, and definitely with shape. Still quite strong, the theme, the raised line of the paper. Then, as I developed my work, I wanted to kind of play with the ideas of fashion illustration. So I started photocopying some of the pieces and just going big and bold and just having fun. Again, I really enjoyed the process, and I'm quite enjoying the fact that, you know, these pieces could become a garment. I'm following at the moment on Instagram a company called One Granary, and as you can see, they take, it could be a fine art textile piece, and it goes through various processes of design to then work against the body and then become a fashion piece. So these have been very interesting, and there is always something new and new ideas with this company on Instagram. I've been posting my work onto Instagram, getting good feedback and some constructive ideas, which is helping the development of the work and pushing the work forward. Here again, having a little bit of fun with some photographic collage and some fashion illustration, and then just playing around with some handmade paper and just quite liking, you know, the pieces just as they are. They stand alone. Some of these textile pieces have been worked and developed around the mannequin, which you'll see later on in the video. And then just placing on various specific parts of the body where I could see the developed ideas. So through here with this page, I've gone in and started to do some knitting of my drawings and experiencing some of the decorative yarns, having a go with some just basic gathering, which could potentially be padded out. Just here a simple piece based more so on the raised line of the paper, and then started to play with the flexibility of a straight line. And then just to conclude my project, we can see here the visual aspect of the raised lines of the paper. This goes into more detail on the blog with videos and so forth. These actually went large scale. I do feel that at this stage that it is still important to use part of the mixed media, but I would say there's mixed media and knitting is 50-50, and I do feel that they do balance out. I went more knitted fabric using decorative yarn. These pieces were successful, and again these pieces engaged with shape and form, and these were the beginnings of the raised line of the paper, with the lollipop stick, which kind of resonated with the classroom based craft products. Again, the flexibility in this knitted piece was really strong and works really well. And it's interesting how you can kind of just spend time playing. It's interesting as well that the pieces that were produced started to feel very fragile, and they encountered the idea of unstructured play, but the element of the fragile and the boldness of the construction is quite strong with these pieces. But they became quite emotional, really, because obviously my connection with dyslexia is quite strong. I had in one of my meetings, kind of one of my peers, when I was discussing my work, says your work feels very negative, where is the positivity within the work? And all I can say is that I do think it's important that people do know how dyslexia can make you feel and the barriers that you incur with dyslexia. And all I can say, or my answer to that now that Project 5 has developed, is the positive side is in the creativity of the work. So I think that would be quite a positive answer to that question. And then the final piece, this piece was all knitted, and it kind of summarizes and works with the body and so forth, the raised line of the paper. Moving on to Project 6, I have started already, and I'm going to work in the same manner. I'm going to start to collect and collate materials, and where I've experimented with mixed media, making yarns and threads for hand knitting. I'm going to kind of maybe go back to the school report. I am going to introduce the red line of dyslexia, using the idea of the raised line of dyslexia, and also as well I've incurred a few samples that have become playful, so I'm going to push the ideas of wearing or displaying on the mannequin where knitted pieces you can actually play with loops and holes, and start to feed through with the red raised line for dyslexia.